So if you're placing Exhibit 118 on the screen, is that an area that you identified as ballistic damage, sir?
Yes.
Is that consistent with anything you'd seen in the past in your experience?
Yes.
What is that consistent with, sir?
Bullet strike, or what's known as a ballistic impact mark.
Listing Exhibit 119 on the screen, is that a more close-up photograph of that impact strike mark?
Yes.
And just by way of perspective for the jurors, is that on the driver's side door, sir?
It's on the driver's door, yes.
And that was labeled ultimately as the letter A, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Calling your attention now to what was labeled by you or other crime scene personnel as letters B and C for potential ballistic damage. I'm placing exhibit number 120 on the screen. Can you tell us, first of all, what we're looking at, what the perspective is, and what's marked?
That's the door pillar between the driver's door and the driver's front door and the driver's rear door. So that's the pillar that separates them.
And this is the driver's headrest here?
That's the driver's headrest on the right. There's plastic trim on the right-hand side marked as C, and then there's damage to the metal pillar marked as B.
Placing exhibit 121 on the screen, is that a close-up of the damage that was labeled as B?
Yes.
And would that be more accurately placed up like that?
Yes.
The letter C, I'm going to place on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 123. What is that, sir?
It's fabric over the trim. I believe there's a plastic piece underneath it, and then the metal pillar is underneath that, or next to that.
So I'm just going to place 126 on the screen, exhibit 126. So I'm just placing exhibit 126 on the screen. The two areas right here, C and B, is that what you've just previously identified, sir?
Yes.
Sergeant Detective, we'll go a little bit out of order here. We'll go to the letter F. Placing on the screen exhibit number 124. Does that show the letter F?
Yes, that's the frame around the window that had been broken on the rear driver's door.
And that's depicted on the diagram right in that area there, sir. Is that correct?
Yes.
Exhibit 125, is that a close-up version of that, sir?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibit number 127. And zooming in, can you tell us what's depicted there, sir?
That's a hole in the rear of the passenger headrest, the front passenger seat headrest.
Was that marked as the letter D?
Yes.
Exhibit 128, is that a close-up photograph of the hole in the driver's side headrest?
The passenger side headrest.
Sorry.
Yes.
Exhibit 129, same thing?
Yes.
Calling your attention now to what was labeled as the letter E, placing on the screen exhibit 130. Can you tell us what's depicted there, sir?
That's a hole in the front of the headrest on the driver's, the passenger side seat.
So is that on the opposite side of the headrest from letter D?
Yes, that's towards the front of the headrest.
And exhibit number 133, is that a close-up of G&H?
Yes,
That's the driver's side headrest, is that correct?
that's correct.
Now, Sergeant Detective Duff, were you present when crime scene personnel or crime laboratory personnel placed what are called trajectory rods in those various holes that you've just testified about?
Yes.
I approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Sergeant Tech, just to clarify, were you present when probes were placed through the holes that you previously testified to by crime scene or crime laboratory personnel?
I believe it was latent print personnel who were trained in that sort of investigation that placed those probes in the headrests, yes.
Now, Sergeant Tech, I'm going to show you 14 photographs. I'd ask you to look at those. Tell us if you recognize what's depicted.
There's several photographs of the headrests and the probes through the headrests, and also the B pillar on the driver's side. That's the pillar between the front seat and the back seat.
Are those fair and accurate representations of the holes that were previously testified to with probes placed through the holes, as well as you indicated the certain area between the two front seat and the passenger seat?
That's
The
correct.
pillar. At these items that are already marked as 136 through 149 be entered as exhibits.
Any objection, counsel?
No, sir. They are received.
Sergeant Detective, placing exhibit 136 on the screen, does that show a probe placed between what was previously testified to, two holes D and E on the passenger side headrest?
Yes.
Exhibit 137, same thing.
Yes, a closer view.
Calling attention now to exhibit 138, does that show at least one side of the probe that was placed in the hole in the driver's side headrest?
Yes.
Exhibit 139, does that show that same probe placed through the driver's side headrest that now shows items marked as H, a hole in the driver's side headrest? Then the probe is touching area that was marked as C and B.
Correct.
Exhibit 140, is that a similar photograph?
Yes, you can see the two holes in the driver's headrest.
When you touch now to exhibit 141, can you tell us what's depicted there, sir?
That's the front of the front passenger seat headrest with a probe through the front of it.
And that's placed through what was previously marked as E.
Yes.
Exhibit 142, does that show the probe that goes towards the driver's side headrest hole that was noted there, sir?
Yes.
Exhibit 143, a close-up of that, is that correct?
Yes.
Exhibit 144, can you tell us what's depicted there?
That shows the back of the driver's headrest, and you can see the probe between the headrest and the B pillar. It appears to be touching the area of the B pillar that's previously been marked as C.
And the area of the B pillar, this area here, sir, was that examined by you and other crime scene personnel?
Yes.
And placing on the screen exhibit 145, is that a close-up of that area, sir?
Yes.
And did you check to determine whether or not there was any ballistic evidence in there, meaning pieces of projectile, copper projectile, lead fragments?
Yes.
And was there any found?
No.
Exhibit number 146, does that show what you previously testified to, but this time from the opposite angle, coming from the B pillar all the way going back to the driver's side headrest?
Yes.
Exhibit 147 shows the probe going from that same area to the hole that was marked as H, is that correct?
Yes.
Showing you exhibit number 148, does that show the probe ending as you previously testified to in the area that's marked as C, the hole in the plastic or the fiber?
Yes.
Lastly, exhibit 149, does that also show a similar angle for that same probe?
Yes, it does, and additionally it shows damage to the metal that's been marked as B.
The area I'm pointing to here?
Yes.
Sergeant Detective, what is the purpose of placing probes through holes from a crime scene analysis perspective?
It helps to determine the direction that the projectile may have traveled when it traveled through an item.
And ultimately, there are persons trained either at the Boston Police Department or other agencies who can do what's referred to commonly as trajectory analysis.
Yes.
Now, Sergeant Detective, in addition to the work that you've already described, the processing of the car that you've already testified to, did you and other members of the crime scene response unit search that car thoroughly for any evidence of any other ballistic damage or bullets?
Yes. After we finished with the passenger compartment, we looked through the trunk to see if there was any evidence in the trunk or any damage to the trunk or any projectiles that may have passed through another part of the car into the trunk.
Very first witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Sergeant Detective, I'm showing you 10 photographs. I'd ask you to take a look at those and tell us if you recognize them.
Yes, the photos of the trunk of the BMW.
That was during the processing of the car on July 16, 2012.
Yes.
Can I ask that the photographs, 10 in total, that are already marked as 150 through 159 be entered in evidence?
Without objection, thank you. It's 150 to 159.
Detective Policing Exhibit 150 on the screen. Is that a photograph of the trunk with the items that you found therein still present?
Yes.
152, a similar but more close-up photograph, is that correct?
Yes.
And ultimately, sir, at some point were all of the items in the trunk removed and the trunk processed thoroughly for potential bullet holes or ballistic damage of any type?
Yes.
Placing on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 155, that include even removing the carpeting area and looking at the area where the spare tire is?
Yes, it did.
Was the spare tire also inspected for any ballistic damage?
Yes.
Placing on the screen exhibit number 158, does that show the trunk after all the items inside were removed?
Yes.
And again, was that trunk thoroughly examined and inspected by you and other members of the crime scene response unit for any ballistic damage?
Yes.
And was any ballistic damage observed?
No.
Were any ballistic items observed, whether it be projectiles or anything of that nature, in the trunk area?
No.
At some point during the processing of the car, Sergeant Detective Duff, were the bodies of Daniel D'Abreu and Zafiro Furtado removed?
Yes, they were.
And were their bodies ultimately searched and photographed?
Yes.
Approach witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Showing you two photographs. I'd ask you if you recognize those, sir.
Yes, they're passports that were removed from the victims.
Removed from their bodies during the search.
From
is that
their
correct,
pockets, yes.
sir? I ask that the photographs, one of Mr. D'Abreu's passport and one of Mr. Furtado's passport, already marked as 160 and 161, be entered in evidence.
Without objection, they're received. Thank you.
Placing on the screen exhibit 160, is that the passport of Daniel D'Abreu that was found on his body on July 16, 2012?
Yes.
Exhibit 161, is that the passport of Zafiro Furtado that was recovered from his body on July 16, 2012?
Yes.
Approach witness, Your Honor.
You may.
I know the Sergeant Detective, I'm showing you one last photograph. I'd ask you if you recognize that, sir.
Yes, it's a photo of the grayscale card with the end time on it, 15:30 hours. It's 3:30.
Your Honor, I ask that the final photograph, the grayscale card, be entered as exhibit number 162.
It'll be received.
So does that indicate that the search, the processing of the motor vehicle, or I should say, at least the photographing of the motor vehicle, concluded at about 15:30, meaning 3:30 p.m.?
Yes.
You may.
So you indicated in your testimony that the cellular phone that was observed in the lap of Daniel D'Abreu, that was ultimately secured as evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm showing you a bag. Do you recognize the exterior of that bag?
Yes.
And whose handwriting is that?
Officer Griffiths?
And he was working for you under your direction at the time of this processing of the car, is that correct?
Yes.
Calling your attention to the item inside, do you recognize that, sir?
It's a Samsung cell phone that was recovered.
From the lap of Daniel D'Abreu?
Yes.
I'm asked if the bag containing cellular phone of Daniel D'Abreu that was recovered from his lap at the end of this next number review.
Any objection? Without objection, that is received.
You may.
So, Detective, I'm showing you an object. Can I ask you if you recognize that, sir?
That's the projectile that was recovered to the rear of the driver's seat on the floor.
That was marked here by number 3 in the diagram, is that correct?
Yes.
That was found on the floor.
Yes.
That was the item that there were multiple pictures taken of, including next to the evidence bag, is that correct?
Yes.
And was this recovered by officers under your direction, including Officer Michael Griffiths?
Griffin, yes.
Griffin, I'm sorry. After the copper projectile that was previously marked as cone number 3 as the next number to exhibit.
No objection. Exhibit 164.
So, Detective, I'm showing you another object. Ask if you recognize it.
Yes, it's a copper metal fragment that was recovered from the rear seat of the BMW.
Was that the projectile that was observed at the crime scene by you on the rear seat and was ultimately recovered from where we see evidence marker number 6 in the rear seat of the BMW?
Yes.
And you see the handwriting of Officer Michael Griffin, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's the same item that was recovered from there, sir?
Yes.
Going out for the copper jacket as the next number exhibit.
May I have a moment, Judge? I have no objections.
165.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
May it please the court,
Please.
Mr. Hagan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Sergeant Detective Duff, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, sir.
Sergeant Detective, you're in charge of the crime scene personnel there at the scene, correct?
At the scene, yes.
Okay. And you would agree that you never get a second chance at a crime scene.
Correct.
It is at its most pristine condition when crime scene arrives,
Generally, yes.
or it should be. Or it should be.
The condition we find the scene is the condition we find the scene.
And your job is critical to an investigation.
Among many other critical parts, yes.
And part of your job, the main part of your job is to document what's at the actual scene.
Yes.
And that's so we can all have a search for the truth.
Objection.
Sustained in that form.
And that's so we can all try and understand what was actually there.
Yes.
We can't go back in time.
Correct.
Neither can you.
Correct.
So therefore, it's critical that you photograph the scene as best as possible.
Yes.
And part of your documentation also includes setting the perimeter if it's not set up already.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Part of your job is setting up the perimeters of the crime scene if it's not already set up once you arrive.
Correct.
Okay. Another part, of course, is to document everything and anything that's there of significance to the investigation.
Yes.
Okay. And that would also include a possible crime scene sketch.
Possibly.
Okay, and that would be to assist investigators and other fact finders of what was actually there and its proper measurements.
Generally, yes.
Okay, and that is because in today's world of forensic science, there are so many things that can be gleaned from a crime scene.
I don't know what you mean by so many.
Okay, let me take them one at a time. You can obtain DNA from a crime scene.
Yes.
Okay, and DNA is incredibly sensitive.
I don't know what you mean by sensitive.
Well, you're aware, sir, that you can obtain an entire profile from the amount of blood that could be found at the tip of a needle.
I'm not a DNA analyst.
But you're aware of how much DNA or how much blood you would require to get a profile, right?
Personally, I'm not aware of the amount that you would need.
You mentioned at the beginning of your testimony that you had been trained at numerous locations.
Yes.
And you'd had significant training in the areas of forensic science, correct?
Different aspects of crime scene and forensic science, yes.
You mentioned that you attended the Hank Williams crime scene seminar, death investigation seminar in Albany.
Yes.
Okay. Did the seminar you attended, did Ms. Kenny Bodden speak there when you attended that
I
seminar?
don't recall. I went several times. There were different speakers.
What about her husband, Dr. Michael Kenny Bodden? Dr. Michael Bodden.
Sustained in that form.
Did you ever attend any lectures of Dr. Michael Bodden?
Objection.
Overruled.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And you also talked about going to the Henry Lee Institute.
I went to a class provided by them, yes.
Okay. And you've obtained, I think you went through 7 different seminars and locations of where you were. And in none of these seminars, they told you that the level and the amount of DNA that you need to get a complete profile from.
I know it can be obtained with a certain amount. I don't know the exact amount.
how familiar are you with transfer evidence?
I know items can transfer evidence.
Okay. And what we mean by that is if I touch a certain item and then I go and touch another, evidence from this location could be then transferred to here.
That's possible.
Okay. And that would include DNA,
Yes,
DNA from blood,
yes,
DNA from epithelial cells,
possibly.
DNA from sweat.
Yes,
Okay. And that would also include trace evidence. Correct?
as far as transfer, yes,
Yes. So including also fibers.
possibly.
Okay. And now, in addition to that, a crime scene is important, especially a shooting like this. Investigators are going to try and determine how many gunshots there were.
Yes,
Okay. So the collection and the preservation and the documentation of a crime scene is critical.
yes,
Okay. And that would assist us in determining, if it's in dispute, whether 5 shots were fired or 6.
Sustained in that form.
Okay. The proper documentation of a crime scene can assist you in determining how many gunshots were fired.
it may assist you. Yes,
And if it's not processed properly, that evidence is forever lost.
it depends on what you're referring to. I don't know what part of crime scene processing. you're
I'll take
referring
it. I'll take it a step down.
All right, hold on one second. The objection is overruled. The answer may stand.
Can you answer the question, sir?
to. I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
That if a crime scene is not properly processed, that evidence could be potentially lost forever.
Yes,
Okay. Now, we've discussed, and you gave some testimony. May I approach the witness?
You may.
That is a schematic drawing of the actual scene, correct?
yes.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how wide the street is there?
Nope,
Okay. And that's because you never documented that.
I did not document it, no.
Okay. Neither did you direct any of your people to document that.
To measure the width of the street, no.
Okay. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how far the BMW is from the curb of the street?
Nope,
Okay. And that's because you didn't document that.
we didn't measure the distance from the BMW to the curb, no.
Neither did you instruct anyone to document that.
Correct.
Okay. So that schematic drawing there is just a guess.
I wouldn't call it a guess. I did not make it, but it appears to reflect what was observed that night based on the photographs.
And there's absolutely nothing that can give anyone, if we're talking about trajectory of bullets, exact, finite details of how far that car is from that street.
I do,
Sustained as to the question. Rephrase, if you would.
Yes, sir. If you were to attempt to determine the trajectory of a bullet, you would need exact measurements, would you not, sir?
I'm not a shooting reconstruction analyst.
But you're aware that those types of measurements are needed to conduct such an analysis, aren't you, sir?
I don't do shooting reconstruction. I don't have any specialized training in that.
So you have no clue as to whether you need measurements to properly determine trajectory of bullets.
Sustained as to the form.
Yes, sir. You have no idea.
I
As
know
to-
that shooting
You
reconstruction.
have to wait until I finish the question, sir. I apologize.
Sorry.
You have no idea as to whether you need proper measurements to determine the trajectory of bullets.
I would believe if you're making a calculation of something, you would need proper measurements
Okay?
in general.
And that cannot be done accurately because no measurements were taken.
Can you answer that, sir?
I cannot answer that question, Your Honor.
Now, sir, we noticed that on the grayscale of the first set of photographs that are on this thumb drive. Can you bring that up for me, please? The first photograph of the grayscale, remember you talked to us about when photographs are started, or they start taking them until they're ending?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a card that has all the different colors on the bottom?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that that first one, we can have that brought up, the very first photo. Was taken at 3:50 a.m. Is that a yes, sir?
It was taken at about 3:50 a.m., yes.
What do you mean, sir, by about?
I was not there when he snapped that photo, but that was about the time that we began photographing the scene.
Now, you admitted this photo. You admitted this photograph, or this photograph was admitted through your testimony.
Yes?
Are you saying this is not a fair and accurate representation?
No, that's not what I'm saying,
I
sir.
have to finish the question, Sergeant Detective Duff. Ms. King requires so. All right. Now, are you saying that this is not a fair and accurate representation of this specific photograph that was taken by somebody else for which you supervise?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the time that's put on there is about 3:50. My watch may be 1 minute off from someone else's watch, or 2 minutes off.
Okay. Now, sir, what this indicates to all of us, though, is that photographs they started taking photographs to document the scene at 3:50 a.m.
Yes.
Okay. And you would agree that that photographs. I got it good from you. You would agree that photographs are probably the most important part of your documentation.
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware, sir, that this incident occurred approximately 2:30?
I was called sometime after that, but I don't know the exact time the call came in.
Okay. Wouldn't it be important for you to know what time the incident occurred so you can have an idea of what occurred before you got there?
I know it happened before I was notified. I don't know the exact time, sir.
Yes, sir, but my question to you is, wouldn't it be important for you to know what time an incident occurred so that way you can try and determine what happened before you got there?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this first photograph is the very first one, right?
Yes.
And it's not taken till an hour and 20 minutes after the scene, after the incident occurred, correct?
That sounds about right, sir.
Okay. And do you know what the time of the first officer arriving was?
No.
Okay. And that would be important for you to know too, right?
I don't generally deal with the first officer. That's more an investigative function.
I'm aware of that, sir, but my question to you is that would be important for you to know.
What time the first officer got there?
Yes. So that way you can determine what's occurred or attempt to determine what's occurred before you start documenting the scene.
Based on the information he gave, yes.
Okay. Now, an hour and 20 minutes go by, correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. Can you testify to anything that occurred subsequent to the call, the first officer arriving, the 22 officers that are there before this photograph is taken?
I can't testify to what happened before I got there, no.
Or to well, you didn't take this photograph either, but you still testified to it, right?
I was there when it was taken, yes.
Okay. Now, you can't give this jury any information or documentation as to the scene prior to this photograph being taken, can you?
I don't believe so, unless some other information was passed on to me, but I don't believe so.
Okay. In addition to that, sir, you don't even know how the sheets were placed on the car.
No.
You don't know who put them there.
No, I do not.
You don't know how they put them there.
No, I don't.
Okay. And in addition to that, you don't know how the sheets were placed on the bodies.
No, I don't.
Okay. Or who put them there.
No.
What was moved.
I do not know that, sir.
And this information comes long before you take photographs the following day of the bodies for which you had testified here to today, correct?
Which information, sir?
The information of people on the scene, in the crime scene, touching the bodies, placing sheets on them.
That information was not available to me. It was probably available to the investigators.
Okay. And they're right there with you, right?
Yes.
You can talk to them.
Yes.
There's no rule that precludes you from speaking to a fellow officer.
No.
And you can ask them, hey, who put the sheets on the bodies?
Yes.
You can ask them, hey, did anybody move anything?
Yes.
Hey, how was this scene before you arrived?
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't do any of that.
I may have asked questions. I'm not sure they would have been able to answer them based on the information they had available to them.
Okay. So you're saying that the officers weren't even there when the sheets were placed there?
That, sir, that is not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I wasn't there.
But let's
sir.
clarify that for a moment, sir. If officers are there prior to you arriving, and sheets are placed on the bodies prior to you arriving, you can ask and ascertain what occurred before you arrived, right?
I can ask, yes.
Okay. And they can give you that information.
If they have that information, yes.
Okay. If they have that information, they can give it to you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you testified about some rules and regulations, correct? Section 205?
Rule 205.
Rule 205, yes. Are you familiar with Section 13 of Rule 205?
I don't know all the sections, what section applies to what. I'd have to refer to it.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to specifically direct you to the section right here. Can you read that to yourself for a moment? Let me know when you're done.
Yes.
Now, Section 13 refers to the removal of dead bodies, does it not, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And in there, there's a subsection that discusses once the district attorney or their designee arrives, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's your understanding that Miss Anderson was there that evening?
Yes.
Okay. You spoke with her?
I believe I did.
Okay. And in such, in this section, it tells you that the district attorney shall have the authority to direct and control the criminal investigation of the death and the removal of the body to coordinate the investigation with the police.
That's what it states, yes.
So basically, two reasons, right?
Yes.
Okay. One of them being the privacy issue.
That was one of them, yes.
Okay. Let's take that first. Now, your concern was the media.
Yes.
Okay. And you're now in charge of the documentation of this scene, and you don't want to do it there because you're concerned the media will photograph the dead bodies.
Not just the media, but any passersby being exposed to that while we're processing it.
Okay. And it is at this time, sir, that you can then instruct or extend the crime scene, can you not?
Yes.
Okay. You can push back the media a bit further, can you not?
Yes.
And any other passerbys.
Yes.
Okay. So that could eliminate that issue, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, you have the ability to use what's called a crime scene privacy barrier screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
like for you to take a look at these 3 photographs. And we'll mark them in a second. Would Your Honor prefer I mark them at this point before I question?
No.
Okay. Is this what appears to you to be a crime scene barrier screen? A crime scene barrier screen looks like?
Yes.
Okay. I have them marked.
Any objection, counsel?
See them? Just with some limited redactions, comment that I don't object.
You offering how many?
2 photographs.
2 photos.
Yes.
All right, they received exhibits 166, 167.
Unless there's an objection, we would then move this, items 166 and 167 in items.
There just needs to be some minor redactions, but other than that, the comment does not object.
I'm sorry, what is it you want to do, Ms. Pius?
We'd like to move these into evidence 166 and 167.
I thought we just did.
I just want to redact this.
Okay.
I won't publish that to the jury. Sir, that is, as you testified, a crime scene barrier screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you see they come in different sizes?
Yes.
And this is also something that is commonly used at crime scenes?
Relatively commonly, yes.
Okay. And this is to prevent anyone from seeing what law enforcement, specifically crime scene personnel, are doing at the scene. That's the purpose
to-
of these.
Prohibit them from seeing what we're doing at the scene so much as to protect the public from the aftermath of a violent crime.
And that also includes any scene, correct? There are sometimes scenes that, whether they're violent crimes or not, that law enforcement would like to create barriers for, correct?
I don't know what you mean by any scene.
This is not limited to any specific type of scene. That's my
No,
question.
it's not limited, no.
Okay. Now, you also you have these scenes in the Boston Police Department, correct?
The screens? Yes.
In fact, there's a photograph of one right there, right?
Yes.
And it says Boston Police Department, right here.
Yes, it does.
Crime Scene Response Unit.
Yes, it does.
That would be your unit, right?
Yes.
The unit you're in charge of.
I'm not in charge of the unit, sir.
The unit that you were in charge of that evening.
I was not in charge of the unit. I was supervising personnel.
Okay, the unit you were supervising that evening.
Yes.
All right. Now, you testified that you needed a search warrant to search the vehicles, correct?
I personally didn't need it, but I believe the homicide unit made that decision.
But you gave testimony to this jury
Yes.
under direct examination of Mr. Hagan, correct?
Yes.
Specifically stating that in most, if not all of your crime scenes, it's done this way.
We generally, based on my experience, generally we would get a search warrant under these circumstances or similar circumstances.
And you generally load dead bodies up on tow trucks and generally take them to a forensic bay for processing.
I would not make a generalization like that, sir.
Okay. And, well, let's clear it up. How many crime scenes have you processed where dead bodies were placed were left in the car, placed on a flatbed tow truck, and driven all the way across town?
I don't know what you mean by all the way across town, but
Let's
I can
not play
think of
words. Let's not play
three-
with words, sir. Just anywhere, driven anywhere,
Let the witness answer the question.
driven anywhere.
I can think of at least 3 occasions where we've done that.
Okay. But you told this jury that happens most, if not all, the time.
That is not what I said, sir.
All right, that answer may stand.
You told this jury most of the crime scenes are processed this way. Do you recall making that statement, sir?
Counsel, wasn't that referencing a search warrant?
That's correct, Your Honor.
It was in reference to the way
Put
this
the
was.
question.
Yes, sir. It was your testimony, sir, that search warrants are gotten. Or let me rephrase that. First, a search warrant is required, and then later, these items bodies are processed at another location. Do you recall testifying to that?
In this circumstance, we did get a search warrant, and we did process the car at headquarters, yes.
You also testified to this jury that you needed this search warrant to process that vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you wish to amend that answer, sir?
No.
Okay. Now, I'm going to refer you back to Rule 205, Section 13. Do you recall that, the removal of dead bodies?
Yes.
Would you like to see that regulation again?
Which section are you referring
Section
to?
13?
No, I don't think I need to see it again.
Okay. So, are you familiar with, if I can have just a moment, Judge. Sorry. My mistake, sir. Section 15. Are you familiar with Section 15? Vehicles removed from crime scenes.
I'd have to refresh my memory by referring to it, sir.
That evening, when you processed that car, were you familiar with that section?
Again, I'm not sure what you're referring to in Rule 205, what part of Section 205, Section 15 covers, sir.
May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may, certainly.
Section here. Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
Yes.
Now, you're a law enforcement officer, right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and of course, you understand the nuances of law enforcement.
Objection.
I'll withdraw the question. You're familiar, sir, with Section 15. Are you now familiar? Did that
I've
refresh your
refreshed my
recollection?
memory, yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with the Section 15, which is vehicles removed from crime scenes, correct?
Yes.
And that section reads in part, evidence shall only be removed after being photographed and latent print processing has been completed.
Yes,
Okay. Now, it uses the word shall, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And the word shall means you must, right?
That's what that word means, yes.
And it doesn't say may, right?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Would you like to look at it again?
No, sir.
You'll take my word for it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also do when you take possession of a motor vehicle, you do what's called an inventory search. Correct?
In certain circumstances, yes, an inventory search would be done.
Okay. An inventory search was done on this car, was it not?
The items were observed, and we made note of them. I would not call it an inventory search.
Okay. You're allowed to do an inventory search, and that does not require a warrant, does it, sir?
You cannot bypass a search warrant and use the inventory search to look for stuff.
Okay. Are you testifying, sir, that you need a warrant to conduct an inventory search?
That's not what I'm testifying to. I'm saying you cannot, under the circumstances that you need a search warrant, you cannot say, well, I didn't need a search warrant because I did an inventory search to look for evidence.
That's a determination made by the officer or investigator on the scene, correct?
It seems this is a tad far removed, so, Mr. Baez, why don't we move on?
Yes, sir. There you go. Can you zoom into this area? All right, sir. You're aware that you're allowed to photograph items that are in plain view.
Yes,
Okay. You're also aware of what's referred to as exigent circumstances. Correct?
I'll see you at sidebar.
That would include this photograph right here, right?
yes,
Okay. A search warrant wasn't needed to render medical aid to the bodies. No.
no,
right?
that's a totally different.
Okay. I'm aware
Question.
of that. I just want to kind of clear these things up. A search warrant also wasn't needed for officers or anyone else to put sheets on the bodies.
I don't know who put the sheets on the body, sir.
That's not what I asked you, sir. A search warrant isn't required to do so.
I don't believe so.
Okay. And the doors were open when medical aid was rendered, correct?
I have no idea.
Fair to say that they would have to open the doors to check and see if the individuals are alive, correct?
I don't know, sir.
Well, the doors would have to be open.
Yes, sir.
You don't know who opened the doors, if in fact they were open. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And they wouldn't require a warrant to open the door to render medical aid, correct?
I think I've already stated no.
Okay, and they wouldn't require aid to open the door and place the sheets on the
Correct.
bodies. Okay. Now, what we're all talking about is the preservation of the scene, correct?
Rephrase. I think we were talking about
This
something
whole
different.
line of the scene, this whole line of questioning, as it relates to the crime scene, we're talking about the proper preservation of evidence so that you can document it, right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, this is also important for the issues of contamination, right?
I don't know what you mean by contamination.
My question to you, sir, is you don't want to take photographs of a scene that's already been contaminated, right?
I would prefer not to.
Correct, because that could, of course, affect the investigation in one way or another.
Possibly.
Okay? Now, since you didn't have a warrant, do you see that, sir? On photograph 22?
Yes,
And that appears to be a piece of crime scene tape, correct?
yes,
In the middle of the car.
Yes.
The middle of the back seat.
Yes.
Stuffed in the back seat.
I don't know if it's stuffed in the back. I see it on the back
You
seat.
see it in between the two, in between where the seat comes out on the bottom and up, right?
Yes.
Okay. And right next to it, right down here, is a projectile.
It's part of a projectile, yes.
Okay. And you collected that projectile as important evidence, right, sir?
The next day.
Okay. After the body was towed. After the car was towed, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay. But it was important enough, and you deemed that an important piece of evidence, would you not?
Yes.
Okay. And that, I guess, ripped piece of crime scene tape doesn't belong there, does it, sir?
I don't know what you mean by belong there. I don't know how it got there, sir, so I don't know the circumstances that it ended up there.
Okay. Is it ideal for you, for an officer to take a piece of crime scene tape, rip it, go to the back seat of a car where a shooting has occurred, stuff it in there, and leave it there prior to you photographing anything there?
The objection's overruled. If you can answer that, you may.
I don't know the circumstances that happened that ended up there, so I don't know if your description accurately represents what happened, sir.
That's not as it should be for a pristine crime scene, correct?
I don't know what led to that being placed there, sir, so I can't answer that question.
And as the supervisor of those who were processing the scene, that would be important for you to know, wouldn't it?
How that ended up there, it's
Yes, sir.
a question. I don't know the circumstances that led up to that again.
I realize that. You've testified to that. My question to you, sir, is that would be an important piece of information for you to know, right?
I don't know whether it would be important or not, sir, because I don't know how it ended up there.
If I can have just a moment, Judge.
You may.
Now, going back to this set of photographs here, you have part of the proper documentation of all crime scene photos is to take what's called long-range photos, right?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Overall photos.
Overall photos. And then there's also what's considered mid-range photos, correct?
Yes.
And then after that, you're supposed to take close-up photos,
Correct.
okay? Now, you're aware of a forensic science that is often referred to as blood pattern analysis.
I'm aware of it, yes.
Okay. And you've attended numerous seminars where this forensic science is discussed.
I've been to seminars where it's been discussed, yes. I have not been to any specialized training in it.
Okay. And you're aware that blood pattern analysis can tell a jury plenty of information about an actual shooting, correct?
I can't answer that question.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
You're aware that blood pattern analysis can shed light on a crime.
In certain circumstances, yes.
Okay. Like, let's certain circumstances like a shooting, right?
I'm not sure how it would play into a shooting.
You're aware of possible what's called high-velocity impact wounds and blood patterns?
Again, I've heard the term, but I'm not especially trained in it.
Okay. But you're trained in taking proper photographs of blood so that this can be later determined by an expert.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Let's nail that down a second, sir. You're trained to take proper photographs.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, you took a photography course that you told us about.
Yes.
Okay. And part of that photography course was talking about taking close-up shots, right?
Yes.
with what is referred to as a scale.
Depending on what you're photographing, yes.
Okay, and scale is just another word for ruler.
Yes.
Okay, and this is so we know exactly how big the blood stain is.
It aids in that, yes.
And the size of the blood stain can assist an expert in determining what type of wound that is.
I can't answer that question.
Okay. But you're trained that the reason you do this is so that experts can come later on and give an analysis.
Depending on the circumstances.
So is that a yes?
It depends on, every case is different, sir, depending on the case.
In shooting cases, that would be important information?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware that experts can tell the difference between blood that gets spattered from a gunshot versus blood that when someone's bleeding and it's dripping, right?
I can't answer that question, sir. I
You
don't
can't
have-
answer that question at all, sir.
No.
Okay. You're also aware that you can tell a lot by the blood stains because of to determine whether they're actual bleeding wounds versus transfer.
Yes.
Okay. You're also aware that if someone comes and places something like a sheet on top of a body, you can make a determination as to whether that was an actual bleeding blood stain or perhaps the sheets may have affected that.
If you can answer that, you may.
I can't answer that question that way, no.
All right. Now, sir, you mentioned you attended a class at the Henry Lee Institute.
I went to a class put on by the Henry Lee Institute.
Okay. And are you familiar, you would agree that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook is an authoritative book and treatise in the field of crime scene investigations?
I haven't read the book, sir.
That's not what I asked you. I asked you, would you agree that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Investigation Handbook is an authoritative book in the field of crime scene investigations?
I don't know, sir.
You supervise crime scene investigators?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know the name of any books that are authoritative in the field of crime scene investigations?
Overruled.
Practical Crime Scene Investigation is one of the books that
Written
I'm
by who,
familiar
sir?
with. I don't recall the author, sir.
Okay. So, do you recognize Henry Lee as an authority in
Yes.
the field of crime scene investigations?
No, this is different. Overruled.
Yes, I would think that he's an authority.
In fact, he has a big institute in Connecticut, right?
Correct.
And many law enforcement come from across the country to attend his lectures and courses.
I believe so.
Okay. Would you have any disagreement with the fact that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook is an authoritative treatise in that field of criminal or crime scene investigations?
Sustained.
Would you consider Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook an authoritative treatise in crime scenes investigations?
Counsel, he hasn't read it. How can he answer that?
Well, he may be aware. He's aware of the expert. He's aware of the courses that's
Not of the content.
very well said. Now, sir, I want to direct your attention to this photo. Can you see that on your screen, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That will qualify as a mid-range photograph, would it not?
Mid-range to close-up, yeah.
Okay. It's not a close-up because you don't have a scale on that photo, correct?
There's no scale in the photo, no.
Okay. And for close-up photos, you're required to use a scale, are you not, sir?
Generally, you would have a scale, yes.
And that's so we would know how big certain marks are on there, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now you're aware that glass, as you see it breaks down, do you see how it breaks down into little tiny pieces?
yes, sir.
Okay. And you're aware that glass can give you, an investigator, all kinds of information about gunshots, correct?
It can give some indication, yes.
Okay. Not only can it tell you how many bullet holes it has in it, correct? It can tell you that?
Sometimes.
Okay. It can tell you which bullet holes came first, can it not, sir?
In certain circumstances, it could. I can't say that this photograph is one of those circumstances.
I'm not asking you about the photograph being the circumstance. I'm asking you about glass being able to make those determinations.
Counsel, let me see you at sidebar.
Okay.
Objection, Your Honor. No foundation is expertise.
If you know that to be the case, you may answer that.
I know that window glass, as I see it on the photo that you presented me, when it's broken, shatters into tiny pieces.
Okay. And this glass and this photograph, let me strike that. The glass at this scene was never collected by you, sir.
No,
And it was never collected by anyone else that you directed.
no,
And it was never collected by any officer on the scene.
no.
Okay. And this precludes an expert from going back, or any crime scene investigator from going back and attempting to obtain this information, correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
It prevents them from going back and collecting that glass, yes.
Okay. And this analysis can't be done by a photograph, can it, sir?
What analysis?
The analysis of determining what gunshots came first and how many gunshots a automotive glass has on it.
I'm not sure that could have ever been done in this case.
I didn't ask you if that could be done, sir. And the proper analysis could never be done because it was never collected, right?
Sustained in that form.
The proper analysis of automotive glass can never be done unless you collect it, right?
Objection.
Sustained in that form.
Any analysis cannot be done of automotive glass unless it's collected.
Objection.
I think you're asking, assuming an analysis could be done,
Correct.
would you agree it cannot be done if the glass is not collected and preserved?
Assuming that an analysis could be done, then you could not do it without the glass, correct?
And you, of course, have testified that as the supervisor of the crime scene personnel that are on the scene are not trained in this area, so you have no idea.
Trained in what, sir?
In the analysis of gunshot through glass.
No, we're not trained how to do that, sir.
If I can have just a moment, Judge, I'm almost done. Sir, I'd like to now discuss with you the issues dealing with Exhibit 164 and 165. These are the projectiles. Do you recall that testimony you gave in the direct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as we're looking at these items, you can tell that they are outside of the paper evidence collection envelope. Wouldn't you agree? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, sir, you're trained in the proper collection of potential DNA evidence, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Reproach.
You may.
May I take those items back before we...
And put it in paper envelopes, yes.
Okay. And the reason for this is that so there are no, there's no degradation of evidence, correct?
I don't know what you're referring to. I've never heard of any degradation of ballistic evidence.
You're aware, for example, I'll use DNA as an example, that you are not supposed to place an item that's to be tested for DNA or may be tested for DNA in a plastic container, correct?
Generally, it would be placed in a paper container.
And that is because heat and moisture can degrade DNA, correct?
DNA evidence, yes.
Okay. And should it become later, and this, let me rephrase that, this responsibility stays with law enforcement throughout the course of a case, correct?
If you can answer that, you may.
I don't know what you're referring by responsibility throughout a case.
I'll rephrase the question. While the evidence is in your control, it is always to be properly maintained.
It should be properly maintained, yes.
Okay. And you notice that these two items for which you admitted into evidence, there are two projectiles that are outside of the paper and in plastic bags.
Yes.
And that's not as you're supposed to process them, correct?
I don't,
Let me rephrase the question. That's not as you're supposed to preserve them, correct?
I can't answer that question. I don't know how ballistic evidence is preserved, and I don't understand how it could be degraded with plastic.
Then I'll ask this question. That's not how you're supposed to obtain the evidence and control it.
I don't know what you mean by obtain it and control it. When it's recovered, it's placed in a paper envelope.
That's exactly the proper procedure, putting it in a paper envelope, not a plastic one, right?
It was not placed in a plastic envelope.
That's not the question I asked you. The question I asked you, sir, is that's not the proper procedure. It's supposed to put it in the paper envelope, correct?
It was placed in a paper envelope, sir.
So the answer to my question is yes. It's supposed to go in a
When-
paper.
When it's collected, it should be placed in a ballistic envelope, a paper envelope.
And it's supposed to stay there, correct?
I don't know how they're archived. I don't know how evidence is archived at the Firearms Analysis Unit.
All right, sir. Now, you started taking photographs. I want to backpedal for a moment or backtrack to the actual scene that evening. Now, when it comes to shooting, I'd like to direct your attention to this diagram. May I have close to witness?
To me, sir.
Am I in anyone's way? Assuming this is a rough diagram of the scene, the crime scene tape was set up in this section here, correct? On Harold Street?
Harold Street, yes.
Okay. And then the other crime scene tape was further back on Marginal Street. Is that correct?
I believe it was on Shawmut Ave in front of some cruisers that were parked on Shawmut Ave.
Okay.
Maybe near Marginal Street.
Now, a line search was conducted at the crime scene at the end, correct?
Yes.
And part of that line search was from one part of the tape all the way to the other.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And what was done was officers basically line up arm in arm and they search every single inch of this area, correct?
They don't line up arm in arm. They line up
Next to each other.
next to each other.
Okay. And they have their flashlights.
Generally, yes.
Okay. And what's important is to get this area covered as well, correct? To search that area?
It's to search the area from one end to the other.
Okay. And that's possible. Some of the things you're searching for here are possible shell casings.
We were searching the entire area, not just in the area that you're...
I'm specifically directing your attention to this area here, sir.
Okay.
My question to you is, one of the things that you might be looking for at this point in time are shell casings here.
Yes.
Okay. One of the other items you might be looking for are projectiles over here.
We would be looking for any sort of evidence that might be related to the case.
So the answer to my question is yes, sir.
We
You might be looking for projectiles here.
Yes,
And that is if someone shot from the BMW over to this area, you might find a projectile.
if that occurred,
Yes. If that occurred, you might find projectiles over here.
Objection. Also speculation.
I'll rephrase the question.
Rephrase.
One of the reasons you search this area is to search for projectiles that may have come from this car.
we had no, that's not correct at all.
No, the answer may stand. That is not correct.
One of the numerous items that you could search for here are projectiles, right?
Projectiles and shell casings, yes.
Yes. And that's regardless of which car it may have come from.
Again, your question seems to be implying something that I don't have any information about, so I can't answer the question that way.
I'm asking you a question hypothetically here, sir. And the reason you would search this area, of course, is because items from either location may have ended up over here. How about that?
When we did the line search, I believe we were looking for ballistics that may have impacted the BMW and bounced off of it.
Okay. And now, you weren't at the scene that night,
I was at the scene that night.
at the time of the incident.
At the time of the incident, no.
Okay. So you don't know what happened there.
No, I don't.
In fact, you don't know what type of firearm is used from the shooting vehicle, which may have been over here.
Correct.
That could have been a revolver.
At the time of the incident,
That
I
could
had
have
no
been a
idea.
revolver?
Could have been a revolver, yes.
Could have also been a semi-automatic.
At the time of the incident, yes, it could have
And
been.
that night, you have no idea which one it is.
Correct.
And a semi-automatic spits out shell casings.
Yes.
Okay. And you also don't know what was going on in the BMW.
No.
Okay. So you don't know if any firearms were in there.
Objection.
Not overruled.
Based on my response to the scene and the evidence I saw at the BMW, there was no indication that there were any firearms fired from there.
Now, there's an indication to you, sir, at that point that 3 gentlemen were in the backseat of that car.
I received information while I was at the scene that there may have been 3 people in the back seat.
Okay. And you received information that 2 of those men fled the scene.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you receive information that 2 of the 3 individuals left the scene, sir?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you know or have any evidence as to what any individuals in the back seats had in their possession that evening?
No.
Now, if a street sweeper went through that area, sir, would that have possibly taken evidence, important crime scene evidence with it?
Objection.
Overruled. If you can answer that based on your training and experience, you may.
Depending on where the evidence was and the path of the street sweeper, that's a possibility.
Okay. And if you take a street sweeper and it is dumped out, the hopper is dumped out, have you ever had to process a street sweeper before?
No, sir.
And is that because a street sweeper doesn't usually go through a crime scene?
Objection.
Overruled.
I've never experienced a street sweeper going through a crime scene.
That's a pretty odd event, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Objection.
Overruled.
If I can have just one moment, Judge, I'm almost done. Now, sir, you wrote a report in this case, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and in the report, you discuss line search.
Yes.
Okay, and in your report, you write, you note that the line search began at 5:16 a.m.
I don't recall the exact time.
If I show you a copy of your report, would that refresh your recollection, sir?
I believe I have a copy of it, if that's okay.
Go ahead. It's the last paragraph of your report, sir.
Yes.
And started at 5:16 a.m.,
Yes.
and you searched that entire area.
I personally did not.
Well, the line search searched the entire area and was concluded at 5:20 a.m.
Yes.
in 4 minutes.
Yes.
Now, finally, sir, I want to show you a copy of the search warrant that you testified to this jury about. You needed this search warrant, according to your testimony, to search the car, right?
I didn't need it. A search warrant was needed to search and recover evidence from the car.
You may.
I'm showing you, sir, a copy of what is listed as the search warrant of this vehicle in this case. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
You recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. In order to search this vehicle, you have to check certain boxes off, right?
Someone does, yes.
Okay. And could you tell us what the first box that is checked that describes the BMW?
Is he the affiant?
No, Your Honor.
No, he's not.
Then why don't we mark this for identification?
Yes, sir.
Q for identification.
I'm showing you what is marked as Q for identification.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see the first box that is checked off?
As sustained.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
Yeah, not the right witness, I think, Mr. Baez. We can receive that for identification. This witness has identified it as the warrant used in this case. Further inquiry, I think, is made through another witness.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you a couple more questions about this, sir. As the person who conducted or processed this car, participated in it, you have testified that you needed a warrant, correct?
A warrant was necessary,
A
yes.
warrant was necessary. And as part of this process, it is you are required to convey information to the detectives who may fill out this warrant, right?
To fill out the warrant?
Yeah. You have to give them information so they know what to put in the petition for the warrant, right?
I did not relay any information that was used in the search warrant, I don't believe.
So you didn't relay anything to the detectives as the supervising crime scene investigator in order to actually process this car?
As far as the warrant, there were detectives from the homicide unit at the initial crime scene. I believe they had the information they needed. I don't know what's in the warrant,
And
sir.
you didn't give them any information from what you saw at that scene to assist them in deciding what they needed to put in here to ask for the search warrant?
I'm sure I had conversations with them at the scene. I don't believe the conversation had anything to do with applying for a search warrant or regarding the affidavit for a search warrant.
Were you the one that conveyed to them that this BMW was used as a means of committing a crime?
Sustained.
I can have one moment, Judge.
Mr. Baez, anything further?
No, sir.
All right. We'll take our lunch and recess and resume at 2 p.m.
All rise, please.